Hi, this is Misha, and I've been asked more than a couple of times what are my favorite AKs or a top favorite AKs list. That's not really our style. We're not really a top 5 or top 10 channel, but we do story times. So I decided to kind of combine the idea of a story time with a tops list. Now, I ultimately chose 6 AKs, and for several reasons. They all have stories behind them. I mean, some of my favorite AKs might be great, but there's literally no story. I just bought it and that's it. Also, I've tried to choose guns that I had invested not just money but time in, projects, conversions, just kind of on that whole criteria, guns I pick up and have thoughts about and have memories or something associated with them. So this isn't, strictly speaking, maybe my favorite AKs, period, but my favorite ones that have stories that I can tell you. And I have kind of organized them going from left to right there based on roughly how long I've had them, with the oldest ones on the left and the newer ones on the right, roughly speaking. And first up, we have my Romanian SAR 2. This is a 5.45 caliber gun. It's a true import. Really, Romanian guns were the first 5.45 imports to ever come into the country. You had the original Romac 992 and Romac 2s. Those gave way to the WUM 2s, Kur 2s, and then the SAR 2s. Now, I bet a lot of you would kind of think I would pick my SAR 1 since it was my first AK. And I almost did, but it appears in a lot of videos, and it really hasn't had much project work on it. I did thread the barrel. That's about it. And it's pretty much your typical AKM. I chose the SAR 2 for a couple of reasons. One big one, the AIMS kits, the AIM 74 kits, are available right now where you can do a conversion yourself. And these guns are still very reasonably priced on Gunbroker, at least compared to guns like the 104FR or the Sgl 31. So how I got this? I bought this gun brand new. Let me think. I believe it was 2002. I remember very clearly, it was my gift to myself for finishing up a semester in college. I saved up over the semester and bought this for myself. Actually, I had to special order it because there were no stores near me. Even the Milsurp stores didn't carry 5.45 guns. You could get the 7.62 and the 223, the 5.56, the SAR 3. But you could not really get the SAR 2s. I remember the only place I could find online that really carried them was Impact Guns. And so I ordered it. I had my SAR 1. I liked it, so I kind of stuck with Romanian. And I was always interested in the caliber after hearing stories that started to circulate in the 90s and early 2000s about all, all the stories that came up with the 5.45. So yeah, I saved up, ordered it. I've had it ever since. It's had several thousands of rounds to it. And in the beginning, obviously it was just your typical SAR 2, fixed wood stock. I bought this folder with the push button, actually from Florida Gunworks, during the ban still, 2003, maybe late 02. Sorry guys, let me flip it around the right side. I definitely never put it on the gun, of course not, during the ban. I put it on, immediately right after, right? September, or what would it have been, I forget the exact date, 04. Anyway, I had the stock, and just so happens that I got the military style with the push button. So that was one of the first upgrades. Then I put a dong foregrip. I've had a few different dongs on here. Who doesn't like, some variety in their dongs? For a long time, I had a Bulgarian Bakelite upper. Very close to Romanian, but this is actual Romanian. I did pick up a upswept charging handle carrier from Kvar. I also picked up an unissued front sight base, but the problem with the Kvar front sight base It had, the pinholes weren't drilled, and it was just going to be a lot of work. And they didn't have the muzzle brakes at the time, and of course those were special 22mm brakes. Originally I got one from CNC Warrior, I think it was, but it wasn't quite threaded right. It just had issues. So it kind of shelved the whole project until these AIM 74 kits appeared a couple of years ago. And then I just bought a kit, and I used the upper handguard, the muzzle device, and the front sight base from the kit to kind of finish up my conversion. I was going to do the gas block too, just to get the accessory lug. I do have the bayonet lug, as you see, but I figured it wasn't worth it pulling off. This gun runs so well, I didn't want to risk misaligning it when putting it back on, and it's not a huge deal to me. I still have a gas block with a lug if I decide I want to put it on later, but I kind of want to keep my gun more or less original as possible, as much as the gun I bought all those years ago. The barrel, the trunnions, all that's still the same. All that's really changed is the furniture, and even though I changed the bolt carrier, this was an unnumbered, unissued one from K-Bar, so it's not a mismatch. So I decided to make this my first one to show you, because I've had it a very long time, next to my SAR-1, the longest. It's a great shooter. It's kind of rough and ready. I like the PA-86 design. It's just different. I got an original 30-round mag. When these were sold as new during the ban, they actually shipped them with Bakelite mags. I believe they were East German because they were technically pre-ban. They didn't ship them with the Romanian steel at that time, but more recently the mags have become available to kind of complete the look. It's just one of those guns that I really enjoyed. I had a lot of fun. It was really the first 5.45 I'd ever shot. No one really had them back in the early 2000s, and the ammo was pretty hard to get. I mean, Wolf would bring over a batch a couple of times a year, and that was it. It wasn't until later that a lot of the surplus hit, and that the kits really came in. So I was kind of ahead of the curve on getting one of these, and never regretted it. In fact, it was such a good shooter, my father ended up buying one too, an SAR-2. So yeah, just a neat gun, and kind of my first unique AK, and a nice easy little project. Next up we have my TGI FEG AMD 65, and for any of you who've watched a number of our other AK videos, you'll know this has always kind of had a soft spot for me. It's been one of my favorites. While my TGI isn't terribly old, I haven't had this particular one all that long, my history with the AMD goes back quite a ways. The first time I tried to order one was right after the assault weapons ban. It was from Vector. They were doing really nice builds at the time with original barrels, extensions. It looked pretty much like this, and they very nice quality AKs. And I did order one, and they accidentally shipped it to Alaska. And unfortunately, it took us a couple of weeks to figure out what happened, and by that point, they had sold out. So I missed out on the Vector AMD 65. I always thought it was kind of a neat gun just for being different. They're very light, they're very short, compact. This folding stock is unique to it. I don't know, just always struck me as different and kind of attention. Again, think about it, back then, 04, 05, there weren't a ton of AK variants, and a lot of the parts kits we know today had not hit the market yet. Then, unfortunately, I tried a Century Arms in 06. I say unfortunately because I had to send my first one from them back. I got it. It had a 14-inch barrel, US made, on a US Nodak receiver. Wood grips, actually nice looking wood, but the first time I went to shoot it, I was holding it, and I felt my hand go forward. And I thought, what the hell? My whole hand went forward and couldn't figure out what was going on. The whole handguard was sliding forward on the barrel because the little lever that holds this plate on was broken. So this plate wasn't really held in place by anything, the handguard retainer, except maybe some park finish on the Sentry gun. So as soon as the barrel heated up and there was some agitation from recoil, this all slid forward and the handguard came off. And since that was, on the barrel, and since it had a permanently attached muzzle device, I couldn't just take it off. So I had to send the damn thing back to Sentry. There was some other kind of unfortunateness. Now in 06, I was a very not rich college student, and had an unfortunate thing. The check I had actually written for that Century Arms AMD bounced. Now, good thing in a way, it was at a friend's shop, a friend that I still have to this day, and it bounced because for the first time in my life at that time, I had an unauthorized charge on my debit card. It was $600 from California. I'm in Arkansas, especially then. So my account was $600 overdrawn already for some reason, and that would be what would have covered the Century gun. So by the time I wrote the check thinking I had the money, I didn't, because someone had gotten to my account. But it all turned out okay in the end. The bank fixed the problem. They were very good about it. More importantly, though, the guy who ran the gun shop, I brought a check. He called me. He was he was probably more patient with me than I would be. He called me and said, and I tried to explain what happened, and I'm sure he was thinking, yeah, right, this is a croco. Yeah, but I came in as soon as I could, brought him a fresh check, or I might have even brought him cash money, and I remember very clearly he came out of the back, shook my hand, and just basically said, thanks for doing the right thing. Hey, all is forgiven. And that really taught me a big life lesson about, you can screw up. It's just how you take care of it. And I'd say that's when we really became friends, because we both saw each other's true qualities at that point. But having to send the gun back on top of that when I got the replacement, I just had a bad taste for the whole Century AMD. I sold it. Because the replacement was brand new. I just put it up for sale and moved on about life. Then these TGIs came out a couple of years later, and I thought this was really cool. FEG receiver, FEG barrel, matching kit. We have lots of videos talking about them. And these are some of the first guns I started to sell once I obtained my FFL. Centerfire had them for a really good price. You could pick them up for around $375 dealer cost, and I could sell them for about $450. Modest profit, but they were good guns. And so I handled a lot of these. Back 09, 010, maybe getting into 2011. And it just has kind of a special place because it was one of the first guns I really made money on and had success with, and I kept one, and this isn't it. Actually, that gun went to someone else, and because it had the glossier paint finish and the single piece break. This one actually came in to that same friend's store, the one that the check bounced at, as lightly used, but it still even had the hang tag on the trigger guard, and I liked that it had the more matte paint finish and the original muzzle brake attached. So I kept this one, sold my other one, and I've had it ever since. Really, the only mods I've done to it are just installing the sling swivel, because they really need that, because it's cool. I do have the leather sling, but it's so heavy on this thing, and this gun's so light, that I've always kind of preferred the crink sling. So it's not quite right on this gun, but hey, it's my gun. And of course, I've got a 20-round tanker mag in here. Once upon a time, no one wanted these. Everyone wanted the 30-round mags. So you could pick up tankers for $10 in unissued condition, maybe even $5 on sale. Nowadays, they're quite desirable. But for a time, people liked them, but mostly you just had people that like to do bench shooting that were buying them. And of course, like the SAR-2, just a very fun, reliable gun. And surprisingly accurate, I'm told, considering it has a 12-inch barrel. Next up, we have a gun that would be one of the very last, not just AKs, but guns, period, I would get rid of. Even though today these are getting very collectible and going for crazy money on Gunbroker. And I still really enjoy going and shooting the shit out of it, because these guns are made to be shot. This is, of course, my Sgl 31, and this is the 94 variant with the side folding stock. Of course, it is in 5.45, and this is as close as we could get to a true import of a Russian AK-74M, which is their modernized version of the AKS-74 standard issue in Russia since the 90s. I actually did get to shoot a full auto at a gallery in Russia back in late 04, early 05. I was there over the holidays from December to January at the time. There was a gallery that had these you could rent. So I always thought it was cool, but it was hard to get modernized Russian stuff in America at the time, especially these side-folding stocks. It was still a couple of years until the Bulgarians came out. At that time, about all we could get in America were some sporterized Vepers and very sporterized Segas, and the Segas weren't in 5.45 yet. Where the whole Sgl story began was with the Sgl Ten. This was a partially converted version that Arsenal sold beginning in 2008, and they actually only sold it for a brief period of time. And I was again in Russia when it came out, so I was not actually here when it was around. Basically, it was converted on the front end, took standard mags, but then had the trigger group in the back and the kind of the hunter style stock. But it quickly gave way by December of 08, January of 09 to the Sgl 20. Which was a fixed stock, but with the trigger group forward, pistol grip, front end, in 7.6239. Then the Sgl 21 came out, and they added both a bayonet lug, which was on the 20 already, but then also the accessory lug under the gas block. So that was really the only difference between the 20 and the 21 was this lug here. Well, having a fixed stock 7.6239 was cool. And in late 09, they actually put them on sale for $4.99, so I did get one, but what I really wanted was a 5.45. So when the Sgl 31 came out, the 3161, the 3147, all the fixed stockers, I almost bought one, but I knew the AK-74M was a folder and really wanted a folder. Kind of held out, and eventually they came out with this. The funny thing was, if memory serves, I remember it was late in the year, I believe it was late 2010 these came out, guys. It might have been late 11, but I think it was 10. It was right after Cugir got their FFL. They weren't a dealer before that. They just sold parts. These came out, and they were about $9.50 new, whereas the fixed stock version was about $7. And a lot of people said, why do you want to pay an extra $250 just for a folding stock? Yada yada, all kinds of reasons. I can add a folding stock to this yet. So that honestly, they were kind of a slow burn. When these first came out, the 3194 solid body and the 3184, the triangle folder, they sold, but they didn't sell that great. And a lot of people didn't think that a Sega was worth $1,000. People didn't view the SGLs. At least a lot of people didn't view them much different from just a standard Sega. Keep in mind you could get a Sporter 5.45 for under $300 at the time. So these seemed really kind of pricey to a lot of people and not worth it. But I bought one. This isn't it. My original one I bought, first run, went to my friend. He taught me at it a couple of years later. He was at my house. He had money in his hands, and he wanted my rifle. And I knew that Cugir still had the 3194s in stock. So I said, sure, take this one. I'll just order another one. And that's this one here. So this is my second one. It's still an Arsenal import. Later, Fine would take over import. And then they would, of course, be sanctioned in 14. And now they're very gone. This has been a bit of a project gun for me. The biggest part I looked for was the original AK-74M muzzle brake. I just really wanted the original chrome lined brake for authenticity, also cleaning, and it just fits so nice and tight. There's no wiggle in this thing. More recently, I actually picked up some original Russian Izhmash black mags from Legion, and that really kind of completed the whole thing. Russian stock. The only thing left I would like to do would be to get one of the spring-loaded push button in the back. Now, your earlier AK-74Ms had this style, but about 10 years ago, maybe 15 at most, they went to the spring-loaded style for rifle grenade launching. But this is as close as we're ever going to get to a Russian issue rifle, current issue. We're not going to get we never were going to get a Russian like AKM or AK-47 because they have not made those in Russia in ages. You know, you get the current manufacturer or whatever the nation's doing. The Polytech Legend's kind of the rare exception, but even there, the Legend still has a lot of more modern features than you would expect. But yeah, this one just has a lot of everything. It's a great shooter. It's comfortable. It's cool. It has the Russian connection. It's the original. And I paid under $1,000 for it. I don't know that I'd pay going rates today for these, but I'm in no hurry to sell. I can't imagine what price these things would have to hit on Gunbroker before I was tempted to sell it. I don't know that really much of anything would, because, you know, you sell something, you have money, the money goes away, the gun's gone, then you just have nothing. And I just really like it. And this is another one of those earlier guns from my early days of being at FFL. These came out only a short time after I had my license, so I sold them and was one of the few to kind of champion them early on. But yeah, they're just really, really neat guns in my opinion, so it really has to be in any of my top 5 lists. And I do shoot it. I have no problem shooting this, because that's what guns are for, as I said. Collectability be damned. And next up, I thought we would move back to 76239 and also do a milled receiver. This is, of course, Arsenal's SAM 7 SF. Appearing in 2013, they kept calling this a game changer. It's one of those cases of Arsenal marketing. Good gun, but good grief, their marketing, they just don't know. Anyway, this was the first time this gun had ever been imported in 13. However, back earlier in 04-05, Arsenal did a run of SAM 7 SFs. It was spelled SA space M dash 7 SF, and these were assembled in the US on technically US receivers, although they were made from Bulgarian forgings with Bulgarian parts including barrels. There's a few minor variations, but they didn't make very many, just a couple of hundred. These were a special limited edition, and even back then they were $1,500 and quickly climbed to $2,000 as they went out of production. And I had one of those original. It was a cool gun, but it was a little different than this. It had the shinier finish that you'd expect. The US one, US assembled one, did come with the birdcage flash hider, and it had this stock, but it didn't have the rubber recoil pad on it. It was just like corrugated metal on the back here. Some of them didn't have the extended release for the stock, some did. So a few minor variations. When these started to come in 13, I thought about it. The US one was nice, but it was assembled here. This one was an import, made over in Bulgaria, really on the same production lines as their AR M9F assault rifles. Plus, these were retailing, I think the introductory price was what, $13 or $13.50, guys? And the US ones were still bringing around $2,000. So I sold my US one to a guy for a reasonable deal for about $1,800. He was happy anyway. I took that money, bought one of these, and pocketed a couple hundred on top of it. So it was a win-win, and I'd still prefer having an import. And I like that this is a version of their military gun. Now, when these were sold, they had the AK-74 style brake on them. I did put the egg beater. I did put the AR M9 handguards on. These usually just came with standard. And I put the more authentic pistol grip on. The original one is close to this, but it's a little larger. This is a little slimmer, fits my hand better. So I modified it a bit to my taste. And I replaced the green sling, the standard sling, with one of the modern tactical Bulgarian slings. And it's got a Sgl Ten waffle in it. Now, on top of just being cool for being an import, it's very nice shooting. Smooth, as you'd expect for any milled receiver. Completely reliable. Comes with a very nice milled double hook trigger. Has a Galil style thumb safety, which is handy. just all around a nice gun. And when you consider what other milled AKs go for, the going rates for these around 1,300, not so shabby. Is it cheap? No, but milled AKs have never been cheap. On top of how much I do enjoy owning it and shooting it, I wanted to bring it in the video today because this is still like one of the few good deals left on the market in mid-2018. The fixed stock versions have more or less disappeared, but the underfolder, which is a little bit cheaper, and the side folder here are still available for the time being. I don't know when exactly we'll publish this video, but this is mid-June, and they're still very much available. I think they're really neat guns, and I think once they disappear, the market will really kind of respect them. Now, some people say the stock is long, and it is. It's NATO length, and that normally would bug me because I'm only 5'6", but for whatever reason, I guess because it's slim, and I think because of how the pistol grip is angled, it's not uncomfortable. And I like that it has this rubber pad because even if I'm kind of sweaty, it sticks to my shirt, my shoulder, so even if it starts to slip, it's not going to go anywhere. And I just like these hand guards and flash hider because they're cool, and they're military. So yeah, I thought I would bring this one out because milled guns are neat. I thought I had one in the set, and it's a good deal, and it really is one of my favorites, and it would be one of the last I would get rid of for a myriad of reasons. If you haven't ever handled one of Arsenal's milled guns, you really should. They are very smooth. The bolts are very smooth, the trigger is very nice, and of course they're just well-made, reliable machines. They're not really any more accurate, at least not noticeably so, than a stamped gun, but they're more fun, more comfortable to shoot, in my opinion. They do weigh a little more, but you know, it is what it is. So yeah, that's why it's in my list today. I'll fold it for you. There you go. It's got a neat little release, spring-loaded, very stolid. Sticking with 76239, but going to a stamped receiver, now we have the Serbian Zastava O-PAP M70, although most people consider this a Yugo pattern, and it is. And I brought this because, well, you got to. This thing was a screaming deal when these were coming in. And again, they kind of flew under the radar. There's a trend there. People seem to start appreciating something once they can no longer get it. EAA imported a highly sporterized version of the M70 from Zastava for a number of years. But it wasn't really until 2012 when Century Arms got a hold of the line, and yes, sometimes Century does good things. This is one of those cases. They started bringing over the original PAP M70, and its biggest thing, well, it had two. For one, it took standard magazines, and for another, it had a standard square back receiver so it could take typical Yugo pattern furniture. The original PAP had a 1.5 mil receiver. It had the slightly heavier Yugo barrel based on the AK-47 barrel, all that stuff. Of course, no bayonet lug, but it did have a threaded barrel, which was nice. Its biggest fault, it had two faults though. One, the bolt was a single stack bolt, which in some guns ran fine. I've got a buddy, actually the buddy who taught me out of my first Sgl 31. His original Gen 1 PAP runs fine, but other people's don't. The other big problem was the scope mount. It had a ridiculous pick rail on the dust cover. And yeah, this one's a relatively tight one, but I mean, imagine having a scope here. There's nothing to secure it. Horrible idea. This led immediately in the next year to the N-PAP, which we know today. The N-PAP was better because it introduced the side rail, like you see on this, and it came with a double stack bolt, but they went to a 1.0 mil receiver. But they still kept the heavy barrel, all that. Pretty much nothing else changed. Then they introduced the O-PAP, what some people consider the Generation 3. This has the 1.5 mil receiver, but it has the much better scope mount. It's actually usable. And these are interesting because these were built, at least some of the parts, from original M70. I don't know if they were B1 or B3 components. That's why the furniture is actually used refurbished, kind of has the oil finish to it. You had the spots for the night sights, things like that. The gas blocks have been swapped out originally for a civilian one though. So they were pretty cool. Now one funny story, today this little crest on the stock is desirable. And this was on the first import batch or two of the O-PAP. But I remember very clearly, and I'm sure you can still find old forum, but people bitched about this to high heaven. Enough that Century listened, and subsequent O-PAPs, they quit putting this in there. I thought it was neat. So, same friend that had the SGL and had the original PAP, I called him up one day and said, hey, these are on sale. I think it was at J&G or AIM or somewhere for $4.99. How about I grab us a pair? He agreed, so I bought two. I thought for $500 on sale. And the really funny thing, the NPAP was more expensive. It was like $5.29. And there was debates back then in 2014 which to get, O-PAP or NPAP. People would dismiss the O-PAP, some of them, saying, oh, it's built from, used, refurbished parts, the furniture is refurbished, get the NPAP, it's all brand new. I'm not saying they were wrong or right, but it's kind of funny to look at things today, how minds change, and this crest is one of them. But man, this is just a screaming deal. But I had to do some work to this one. Shortly after buying it, I picked up this grenade launcher gas block unit here with the bayonet lug from Apex, and it promptly sat in a drawer for years. But I had it, and I knew I did. Eventually, though, I met a really good gunsmith around here a couple of years ago. He put it on for me. I also put a sling swivel on the buttstock here, kind of AKM style. I would have enjoyed putting it on the side, but as you see, there's a scope mount in the way. So it was either pop the mount off or settle for it down here. I'll go with this way because, the mount is useful. We do have the spring-loaded back here. This was always here. I am still missing the rear night sight, although a friend owes me a set, and I'm sure he'll get it to me. But I do have front night sight now. Same friend sent that to me. Boop, boop. Pretty cool. So I've gone a long way to making this into a pretty authentic M70B1 clone, and it wasn't that difficult. Even the mags kind of have a story with these. These are the Yugo bolt hold open mags. See? For a long time, the original Yugos were not rare, but they were pretty desirable. If you found them for 20 bucks, that was a good deal, whereas just regular mags were 10 and less. But in more recent times, newer productions, Zastavas and others, not to mention just more surplus, have hit, and these mags have become much more available and as cheap as $8. And we have tried the new Zastava mags. I think this is even one of them that Apex had for $8, $9. We have a video kind of showing it in this gun and others, and they work really well. And they're kind of really thick, heavy stamped steel. They've got the bolt hold open feature. I don't know. So the mags for one time were kind of hard to find for these Yugo guns, but now they're available. But I just thought I'd bring this out because the story of how these O-PAPs were such a great deal for a couple of years, and some people bought them, some people didn't, but now they're bumping $1,000 on Gunbroker, unconverted or anything, just the gun. And I think that's really funny considering people were hesitating to buy them at $550 for so long. But on top of their collectability being pretty, next to pre-band Mitchells, this is about as good as it gets for a Zastava. They're just good shooters. Again, reliable. They're built like tanks. The only thing I would say, and this goes for all the Zastava guns, I would swap out the recoil spring, and I have. And this one I just put a standard Polish spring. I think in my O-PAP I put a wolf, but it doesn't matter. See, everything else you've got. You've got the rubber recoil pad. Takes standard furniture. It's got the long hand guards for Yugo. Came with the cleaning rod under the barrel already. It does not have the bolt hole open cut in the safety, which I prefer. More B1 style. Dimpled receiver. Just a neat gun. The only ding some people have, the barrels aren't chrome lined on these, but so what? They are hammer forged, they're good barrels. So yeah, that's why it's kind of in my list. And even today, if you could get one of these, I'd say for $800 or less, it's still a pretty good deal, considering what Wassers are going for. I would definitely take one of these over a Wasser. The bluing is better than the Wasser's Park. Got a nice polished bolt group. Yeah. So that's why it made my list. And probably one I would not, if I only kept one Yugo pattern, it would definitely be this gun. Because it's authentic, and it's just the basic M70B1, which is the classic. And for my final rifle and story time here, it had to be this one. For oh so many reasons. The Finnish Valmet M62S. Chambered for 7.6239. Built on a milled receiver. Oh, there's just so much here. The M62S is the semi-auto version of Finland's military issue rifle, which they adopted in 1962, went into service in 65, and really is still in service today, so over 50 years. The RK62 is derived from the AK. It's kind of analogous if you think about the Finland's M39, how it relates to a Mosin. Well, that's how the RK62 relates to the AK Type 3. Very much inspired, even a few parts interchanged, but you know, very much Finned, reindeered. And it's really amazing when I think back that a semi-auto version as unmolested as this ever came in, because in the 60s, while the laws weren't that strict then, the market just didn't really want military guns. And that's why only a couple of hundred of this exact style made it in. The first ones to come in like this were literally just semi-auto RK62s. We had the same fixed tubular steel stock. Even has the storage compartment for the cleaning kit here. We have this bicycle grip, which has a steel core. We've got the rear sights that can be flipped over to be used as night sights, which is cool. Yeah, it's got I'm not slamming it, guys. That thing's got a spring on it, I tell you. Got front night sight here as well. Hooded. Interestingly, this front sight isn't really elevation adjustable, it's just wind adjustable. You've got the cheese grater handguard, exposed gas tube. We've got this milled receiver with lightning cuts, AK style charging handle, AK style safety, although they did extend the shelf there a wee bit. Flip it over. Unlike a Galil, you see a second lightning cut here. No Galil style safety. They do have a protected mag release though. We've got a 16-inch barrel. Interestingly, they did not chrome line these. The handguard attaches totally different from an AK. Front sight base and all this is different. As you see here, we have a 3-prong flash hider with the bayonet lug below, and it's actually pinned onto the barrel. So, pretty different setup. But yeah, they only brought in a couple of hundred setup like this before they started adding wood. The next batch after these would have wood stock and grip. Then they would get rid of the cheese grater handguard and they would go back and forth. They would do a few more tube stalkers in the 70s in the M76 line, but military guns were a niche market, and 7.6239 was a very obscure caliber in America, really until all the Chinese ammo started to flood in the mid-80s, and of course SKSs and everything else for it. So this was kind of weird that these came in, and they weren't cheap either. I wanted one of these for ages. I really enjoy Finnish guns. One of my college professors, he was never actually my professor. He was actually the father of a classmate, but I knew him really well. He was pretty high up at the university. He had a thing for Finnish guns, and he was an engineer, and I figured, well, heck, if he liked them, if anyone would know what's a good gun, would be an engineer with a passion for firearms. So I shot his M39, a few other guns, and really started it. I thought, wow, if they could do this with a Mosin, what else can they do? So I don't have a huge Finn collection, but I've always had them, and I thought this would go really neat with things like my Suomi and everything, but they've always been really expensive. Now you can get the 223 versions, even sometimes the 308 versions for reasonable money, and that's kind of where it began for me. The 7.6239s, they didn't bring in large numbers because they didn't sell very well because of the caliber. Where it began for me, I don't exactly remember the year. I'm thinking it's before we moved. I believe it was 2011, 2012. When we still were down in Ozark, but we came up here, where we're at now, in Northwest Arkansas, to this gun shop that we didn't normally frequent. But I happened to have called them, and they said they had a Valmet on the wall. That's not something you see in Northwest Arkansas much at all. So we booked it up there. They didn't have a Valmet, they had two. They had an M76, which is the standard rifle in 308, and they had the M78, which is the so-called RPK or light machine gun, again in 308. Both of them on milled receivers. Very nice guns. They weren't mint, but they were excellent, very good to excellent condition. Someone had shot them, but also taken care of them. And they had $1,500 a piece on them, which was a good deal back then and would be a screaming deal today. And I said, well, what if I take both? What will you do? We'll do $2,800 a piece, and we'll throw in 2 extra mags. Now, anyone who's ever owned a 308 Valmet knows how hard and valuable those 308 mags are. So right there, they're basically saying we're going to give you another couple $100 in mags. So they gave me a total of 4 mags and the guns for $2,800, and the only catch was I had to write them a check because I didn't have cash on me that day. So those were my first Valmets, and I really liked them, but it wasn't really what I wanted. So through some other trading, I ended up with a 223 folder. You could actually still get the 223s very cheap at the time. I think I paid about $1,600 for the 223 folder, and I paid like $1,000 for an M71 and 223. So at one time I had those 4, but I really wanted a 7.6239. I won't go into all the details because it's kind of a lot of trading back and forth, but let's just say I used those 4 guns to trade for this and that, and I eventually got the gun here I really wanted. I started off with a wood-stocked version of this, which was close to what I wanted, and then I got this tube stalker, honestly thanks to the New York SAFE Act. After Sandy Hook, when New York passed the SAFE Act in 2013, citizens up there had to get rid of their pre-banned guns, and that's where this came from. And I'm sure the guy who had to get rid of it hated it, but I hope he knows even now, 5 years later, it's in a prized possession in my collection and probably my single most prized AK. So at least it went to a good home, I hope. Although I do shoot it. Again, I don't really have safe queens that never get shot. I also ended up, because after selling all of those, the 308s did pretty darn well, I ended up getting an M76 version in 7.6239 as well, which looks very similar to this, but it has the more modern handguard and the stamped receiver. Now, I sold it when we moved 4 years ago to help pay for the house. In fact, it put a big chunk on the deposit for the house, so no regrets there. I mean, of the two, I'm obviously going to keep the one that the military uses. They did actually buy a few of the stamped guns, but it's the milled ones that really got issued. So I'm down to one Valmet now, but with all the horse trading and back and forth, I'm in it pretty good. A lot of work, a lot of time, but thanks to a lot of hard work, not a lot of money, which that was the only way I was ever going to be able to afford a Valmet was, you know, putting my work and time into it, because I never had the money. The ones like this that I wanted were always hard and expensive. The last story, when I got it, it had the metal mag. And I was going to put that in for the vid, but then I thought I'll show the green mag, because there's kind of a neat story to these. This is the kind of 80s, late 80s, early 90s production, early polymers made in Finland. They are metal reinforced, but they would soon go to the black style, so the green was kind of a transition. I found these at Numeric years ago, and they had them cheap. I don't think anyone knew they had them. You could buy them in a 3-pack with original Finn mag pouch and oil bottle, and they were like $40 for all 3 in the pouch. So I bought maybe half a dozen sets. I kept 2 for myself and gave a couple others to friends, and then when I sold my M76 stamp gun, I gave 1 set away with it. I like them. They're neat. And what's kind of cool about these mags, that Arsenal Sam 7 SF you saw earlier with the Bulgarian waffle mag, that Bulgarian pattern is kind of based off the later black version of this Finn mag. It's a lot of similarities. But yeah, this had to be the last gun, even though maybe I have had it longer than a couple of the others. I've had it, I guess, 5 years now, because I think it was still winter in 13 when I got it. But neat gun. It really goes well with my other Finn collection, and honestly, one I never thought I'd own. So even years later, I'm still really just one of those guns you're thrilled that you have. So it's very much appreciated. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was worth the wait. I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what I value. You notice all of these are imports. That wasn't by design. I seriously thought about a few different kit builds I have. For example, I really like my SLR 100, the Hungarian build. I also like my Polish AKM build and my Legion USA. But in the end, the imports just have more stories behind them, and they're just, more worth having, and because they're originals. You also notice there are no RPKs. I have a thing for RPKs, so I just said, let's just stick to AK, AKM, AK-74s. And kind of in the same vein, you guys know I love the Polish Archer. Bringing it out would have been kind of redundant. It has its many videos just dedicated to it. So it's definitely one of my favorites, but it's still an AK, but just barely. I mean, I've often thought the Beryl, if you changed it anymore, would no longer really be an AK. It's kind of like the Galil in that sense. And even the RK, I'd say the M62 is right on that edge. Any more differences, and it's not really an AK anymore. In fact, I originally wasn't going to bring this out, but I just couldn't help myself. Well, those are my favorite AKs and stories about them. We'd love to hear about yours below, so please share in the comments. If you liked the video, please click like. Also, let us know which one of these we showed, which one of the 6 you like the most, or something else in my, what else you've seen. Very curious what you like. And, this is what I like right now. Ask me in a month, I might change my mind sometimes. But as always, we appreciate you spending time with us. If you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. And as always, we'll catch you next time.